Enter the chat, the people-pleasing avoidant. Now, when most of people are thinking about avoidance, they do not think of people pleasers, but that's the thing with many avoidants. They come from this place of enmeshment. Hi, my name is Flora, and this is Redo Love. And join me to redo love together from the inside out. Here's what's fascinating about this particular type of avoidant from a psychological standpoint. These people typically had to do a lot of things early on. We're talking about like kids who had to take care of potentially like a drunk mom, a sick sibling, or basically became little adults way too soon. So they're naturally doers. They learn to be loved through doing. Oftentimes they're the older sibling, and through the act of helping, being helpful, taking care of things, that's how they received praise and love. Neuroscience tells us something really interesting here. When children's developing brains learn that love equals performance, their neural pathways literally wire for external validation. The prefrontal cortex, which handles decision making, becomes hypervigilant about others' needs while completely ignoring internal signals. The thing about these people that's really tricky is they're well-meaning, good people who are just trying to do what they know how to do to survive in the world like the rest of us, because they were somewhat raised right in the sense of do for others, take care of things, be helpful. They come off really great. But here's where the neuroscience gets really interesting. Their nervous system is literally wired for hypervigilance around others' emotional states. The mirror neuron system, which helps us empathize, is working overtime, while their interoceptive awareness, their ability to sense their own internal state, is practically non-existent. These types also tend to be yes people because they want you to be happy, because they don't want to have a problem, because they're wired to be hypervigilant about how you feel. Avoidants generally always don't like conflict. So because it's easier to say yes a lot of times than it is to say no and see the disappointment potentially on your face. So what's happening neurologically is that their amygdala, the brain's alarm system, fires off whenever there's potential conflict or disappointment. So saying yes becomes a protective mechanism to avoid triggering their own flight or freeze response. There's almost like this parroting thing that goes on, not exactly mirroring, which would be like more healthy communication, but they parrot. You'll say, I love this thing. And they're like, oh yeah, me too. But they may not even care at all. They're just going along in the conversation to kind of make it flow and make it easier. But there's always a vagueness around it. I said to somebody like this, I'm going to order food. What do you want? They said, I totally don't care. I said, okay, great. I ordered Indian food. They came. I said, I ordered Indian food. They're like, oh, I hate Indian food. And I was like, but you said you didn't care. And then they were like, no, it's fine. It's totally fine. And then they sat and ate the whole thing. Now, this is like a meaningless example. And at the time was like, totally didn't even clock that anything was going on. But now when I see everything else that happened, and in retrospect, I'm sitting here thinking, do they like Indian food or don't they like Indian food, right? Like I never really knew that. And there are several other examples of things like this where I'm circled back to thinking, wait, did they actually like that? Or was it me that liked it and they were just agreeing? So from an attachment theory perspective, this is like part of their anxious system trying to create safety through sameness. Yes. Avoidants also get anxious. They just get internally anxious. And because they get so anxious that they go into freeze mode and they shut down. Authentic self got buried so deep under these survival mechanisms for trying to be the same that they genuinely don't know who they actually are or what they want or what they like. I'm not saying they don't have preferences. I'm not saying they completely don't exist, but I am saying all of that is buried in a very deep place that they are not used to accessing. This is why these particular people can be so dangerous because they seem amazing. Oftentimes my clients tell me that they never had a fight, that they dated for 2, 3 years and they didn't really have problems. They never they don't understand what happened. These people were going along and going along and going along until they couldn't anymore. The whole time, what's being missed is that while they're doing for you, they're planning, they're sending suggestions, they're being really good about considering your feelings, they are also really bad about considering their own. And they're really not even thinking about it until it gets so bad that they, explode, implode, or have to take a really big break. And here's the psychological trap, is that you're lulled into a sense of comfort thinking you're on the same page, because the whole time they're parroting you, you're on the same page. Your brain's reward system is getting hit with all the right chemicals: dopamine from feeling understood, oxytocin from feeling connected, but it's all based on a false premise. That's when the wall appears, or the wall appears when they're hitting their own boundary that they didn't maybe even know that they had, and they will only advocate for themselves when it's at the line of whatever limits they have. You don't even know there's a problem at all, because everything is being built to feed your ego and your comfort. You find that line somehow. Something happens, things come to a crossroads, and they're like, oh no, you can't come here. I walked you here. I drove the car. I bought the tickets. I booked the hotel. But no, 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 no. You can't actually come in. Did I mislead you by doing all those things? Oh no, 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 no. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to mislead you, but you can't come in. What's happening is that their avoidance system finally kicks in when intimacy gets too real. All that people pleasing was actually a defense mechanism to avoid truth, honesty, emotional intimacy, showing themselves, being themselves, while still getting their attachment needs met through usefulness. From an attachment theory perspective, what's brilliant and tragic about this pattern is that it allows them to get close enough to feel connected and valued, but not so close that they have to risk genuine vulnerability. The people pleasing creates what psychologists call pseudo intimacy. It feels intimate because they're so attuned to your needs and you feel special and cared for, but it's actually a carefully constructed barrier. The neuroscience here is also fascinating. Their attachment system is getting activated enough to release bonding hormones like oxytocin when they're being helpful and appreciated, but their nervous system never has to deal with the terror of being truly seen for who they are, because they don't even know who they are underneath all that performing. It's like they found the perfect loophole. They get to feel needed and connected without ever having to face the core avoidant wound, which is usually, if you really knew me, you'd leave. So instead, they show you this incredibly helpful, agreeable version that's impossible to reject. And that's why the wall appears so suddenly and feels so jarring. Once you start wanting the real them, not just their service to you, their system goes into full avoidant lockdown, because now you're asking for the one thing they absolutely cannot give: authentic honesty and emotional intimacy. All that people pleasing was never about getting closer to you. It was about staying safe while feeling connected. It's avoidance masquerading as connection, which makes it so much more confusing and painful for everyone involved. Then you realize the whole time you don't even know who the hell you were dealing with, right? Because the whole time they're just so great and so happy to be there, totally mimicking your interest and excitement, and without a doubt feeling some as well. But also knowing the whole time there's a hard line drawn and there's no space for what's next. It's hard to recognize this up front because you don't know it until you know it. But the solution is to push the boundaries early. And this is why I highly recommend doing that. It's not about being aggressive, but it is about getting answers. If you know what you want and you're in that place, then it is time to have a clear-cut, concise conversation, knowing that you might lose this person, knowing that they might have to come clean and tell you that They're not interested, but you know what? You're not going to be wasting your time. You're not going to be playing it cool, all the while getting more and more involved at getting your own feelings more and more involved, right? Push that boundary sooner than later if you feel it and you want to see where things stand, because the longer you sit in the unknown with somebody like this, the more you're going to gain feelings. And they've always known they're only taking things so far. In the meantime, they're just utilizing you for how you make them feel, for the fact that they can be useful and helpful, for the fact that they feel liked and accepted because you're enjoying the pleasure of how they are making you feel. The real way to see through these people is to watch how their actions align with their words. That is the most important part. This is really, really seriously a case where actions do not, I repeat, do not speak louder than words. It is really important to make sure that somebody's actions are aligned with their words and their intentions. A lot of times when people come to me as, with an insecure attachment style, they are coming to me wanting to be secure, thinking that like being secure means you don't experience pain, you don't experience hurt, you don't experience like these feelings. Of course you do. Of course, everybody experiences pain. Everybody loves someone and loses them. Everybody gets rejected, right? And if you are not, then you're not living at all. So the idea that you're going to avoid pain is kind of ridiculous. It's just how quickly you jump back from it. And it's also about what you make it mean about you. If you are making it mean that you don't deserve love because somebody rejected you, that is, going to be a lifelong problem. If you recognize that, all right, this thing didn't work out, it's all for the best, this wasn't my person anyway, I discovered all these things in this interaction that I'm going to continue to talk about, life goes on. So I found that out sooner than later, still with a little bit of a, oh, what? You did all these things, but you never intended to do the thing? Like, what the fuck has been going on this whole time? It's hard because in the situation where I discovered this, I will say things went in a perfect way in that I got the information I needed in a timely manner before I got caught up. But it only happened because the boundary got pushed and I cognitive, like with the full, complete, total intention, pushed the boundary to see where this was going. Maybe could have been a little bit more clear communication up front. Part of the fun of dating, right? It's the discovery phase, the where is this going? But if you want to experience more of that discovery phase, if you don't want to push, if you want to let things kind of play themselves out, you have to be able to take the fact that it might not go the way that you want, and you have to be able to deal with the rejection of it. For me, it didn't go like the way that I wanted and that I hoped that this was a real connection, but in actuality went exactly how I wanted it to go, because if we're not on the same page, then you're not for me. And I would like to know that sooner than later. This connection only means what I think it means if we both feel it. And it can't just be a one-way street. And because I'm very embodied in that, I was able to push that boundary knowing that I might lose this person, lose this friendship, lose this connection. And I was fine to do that. I found out all this instead. And it was pretty shocking because, again, it was kind of like a new avoidant alert. It was like a new level, a new side of avoidance that I don't think I had really seen so clearly before. And it was just shocking to see, like, you can do all these things, like walking me all the way to the line, knowing that you were never going to cross that line with me. Why didn't you just tell me on that long walk over that you were never going to cross this line? We would have been fine. It would have been no big deal, We would have walked another way. So that processing took me a minute because, we're all human and we all have feelings and we all have emotions, and it's okay to have those emotions. It becomes problematic when you make it mean something about your value, when you make it mean or you let it feed that story, that wound that you're not good enough. The processing took a minute. But it also made me realize that if you could do all that, if you could take all those actions and make me feel that way, then like you almost don't have a spine. Like you have no ability to say no, no ability to take every single misleading step that was very obviously misleading had you spoken to anyone about it, and go forward with it, because you went forward with it because you didn't want to disappoint me and because you're being nice, but in the end, we can't even be friends or like retain any kind of connection because you like misled me the whole way. And now I'm wondering who you are altogether. Everything that you showed me, every perception I had of you was based on a lie. And maybe it was based on what I wanted to see, sure. But also, you had every opportunity to tell me, no, 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 you're misunderstanding. And you never did. The real truth about what's happening, and here's what I realized, is this wasn't a person who liked me. This wasn't a person who cared about how I felt. This wasn't a person who's considering how he was making me and other important people in his life feel. This was a person who was going along to be accepted, skating by, knowing he had a limit, but not sharing it with those that that limit would actually affect. He wasn't standing in his truth. He wasn't standing up for what he thought was right and wrong. He was just going with it until it hit that wall for him. And then he had no choice but to be honest, thus ruining any possibility for further connection. The other side for me, it was shocking and it felt like being blindsided, not because he was outwardly being dishonest about anything. But if you can act like that and not feel like that, then what else aren't you saying that is antithetical to everything you are showing me? That would be a very hard connection for me to be a part of because I wear my whole self on my sleeve, bad or good. Like what you see is what you get. How I'm acting to you is how I feel. And if something is off, I will tell you it's off. And you will know. You will never wonder who you are with me. So when people are making me wonder what they're really thinking or what they're really feeling at this stage, it used to be really hot and sexy. At this stage, it's like a big red flag warning sign, you know? And there's a lot of self-abandonment in this, obviously, right? What's happening psychologically is a complete disconnection from their internal emotional landscape. Dr. Dan Siegel, Neuroscience, talks about interoceptive awareness, our ability to sense our internal bodily signals and emotions. In people-pleasing avoidance, this system is severely underdeveloped. Their insula, the brain region responsible for self-awareness and emotional processing, basically went offline during childhood to survive emotional neglect or overwhelming responsibility. They learned that their feelings didn't matter, only other people's did. So they literally cannot access what they want or feel in real time. This is the same mechanism that has avoidance pulling out just before the engagement or just before you move in together. They seem great, everything seems fine, and then they just can't do it because the whole time they never checked in with themselves. They were just doing what was expected, and as long as everyone was happy, it was fine. But they were never taught to also consider how they felt and that it was okay to say that out loud. And the thing about this quality is it's something I call an amoeba effect. It's an amorphous blob that has no identity and latches onto yours or onto whoever it's around, as long as it can, really, until it's done for whatever reason. You don't really know who these people are because they don't know who they are, or they lack so much confidence that they don't think their feelings are important enough to share. And I'm not saying this from a sense of trying to be mean to avoidance, but this quality becomes like that, you know? And from a psychological standpoint, this is what happens when someone's sense of self never fully developed. Psychologists call this identity diffusion. They literally don't have a stable sense of who they are outside of their relationships and roles. Their neural networks for self-concept are weak, and because they were never allowed to develop them. And instead, they developed what's called a false self, a highly adaptive persona designed to get love and avoid abandonment. But here's the terrifying part. They've been performing this false self for so long that they genuinely believe it is them. When you're asking for intimacy, you're asking them to drop the mask, but there's often nothing underneath except terror and emptiness. Their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for future planning and consequence evaluation, is completely focused outward. They can predict your reaction to your needs, your emotional states with scary accuracy. I mean, this person, I would cough and this person would be staring at the television and pick up a glass of water and hand it to me and never like even look up or look back. He was on top of it. And that made me feel really cared for and thought about, right? But when it comes to predicting their own feelings or the consequences of their people pleasing behavior, that system is offline. This is why they can seem so emotionally intelligent about everyone else's feelings while being completely blind to the damage that they're causing. They're literally operating with half a brain. The half that monitors others is hyperactive, while the half that should be monitoring themselves is dormant. Here's the reality, the really tragic part. When that well finally appears and they have to be honest, they're often just as shocked as you are because they genuinely weren't consciously planning to mislead you. They were just following their nervous system's programming to avoid their own reality at all costs. At the end of the day, people pleasing avoidants aren't trying to hurt you. Their nervous system is literally wired to avoid their own needs while hyper attuning to yours. But understanding the psychology doesn't mean you have to accept the behavior. Your job isn't to fix their attachment style, it's to protect your own emotional well-being by recognizing the pattern early and having these hard conversations before you're in too deep. Because at the end of the day, love without authenticity isn't love at all. It's just two people avoiding themselves together. And that's not the love any of us deserve. If you like what you heard today, please go ahead and subscribe, drop a comment. I'd love to interact with you and answer any questions you have. And check the more box because all of my links for my work that we could do together is there.